Hi everyone, and welcome to week 3. So this week is all about color theory and obviously adding color into your design work. So color, like typography, can be a lot more complex than we think. I actually found the color wheel and the fact that it was created by Sir Isaac, or intuited, I should say, by Sir Isaac Newton, really fascinating. I personally am a slave to the color wheel when it comes to picking out the colors. I'm all about the wheel. There are really great ways to combine color, but like font and like typography, you want to combine them in a way that's going to be visually appealing. So there's a lot of good resources this week that talk to you about color. There's some really good color combining resources. Feel free to really be inspired by them and, definitely experiment. So on the subject of designing in your business cards, I wanted to show you a few things. For some of you who are new to design, I know it can be hard not to be able to center, to center all the text, but the reason why I have that rule is because centering text is so easy, and this forces us to experiment with left alignment and right alignment. And if you end up with a center design, that's fine, but you need to at least know that you're making that choice purposefully and be able to rationalize that choice, and not that you're just doing some default move. Things that I've noticed in your initial designs, a couple of things. The first thing is, and this always happens every single time on versions 1 and 2, but we often end up with your text way too close to the margin. Okay, so here, like some of you you're putting the top of your type like really up here, or you're mashing it against here. Now this is fine to bring a line and come out to the margin. That's called bleeding into the margin. That's fine, but you don't want to, it looks too crowded, and it also becomes a printing issue because you could be cutting yourself off depending on what kind of printer you're using. So not that you have to have this exact margin, but come down a bit and move over a bit. This is the beauty of not having center spacing, is you want to play around a little bit. But as you're doing this, one thing that you want to keep in mind is your invisible lines. This is really super important. Okay, if you're going to bring a line in like this, see how if we draw the invisible line, it's here. That's the clean look. That's going to give you that finished, more polished look than if you, let's say, if you decided to take your line and go over here. It just makes it seem more arbitrary. But when everything is joined by that single line, it does actually kind of pull it together. And here's another example. And by the way, what I'm looking at is an article on the Canva site. The funny thing about the Canva site is it's kind of siloed. So the design part is really separate from the design studio, where they have lots of really great resources, many of which I share in this course. And they also have a really good photo editor, but you have to Google it separately to get there. So it's a little strange, but I did want to point out that I am using these examples, and you will find these in your week 3 resources folder. But again, let's look at the attention to the invisible line. Okay, here we have the line goes right here, and we have the line over here on the right. Okay, so now you could try doing a left alignment there and a right alignment there, or you could mix it up. But the point is, you want to have those crisp invisible lines. Now let's look at where consultant falls. If we were really looking at that, it's really coming in the middle there. Okay, so and that's purposeful. Okay, if it was like up kind of here and it wasn't intersecting at all, it would probably look a little arbitrary and a little strange. So that's why it's hitting in the middle. So you want to use those lines that Canva or in Photoshop that you can bring up to really see where your lines are all hitting. But you definitely want to make sure you're having these lines here. If you can, like if you have text on the top and the bottom, and you can make it, if you had enough text coming out here, you could try to make the line come over here. So it's all depending on how you're going to align it. But you must have attention to those invisible lines. That's really what's showing me that you're really designing and you're really thinking about alignment with purpose. Here's a design that I really like. I like that the way she's really using the lines here, just very creatively. The typology is really well done. It's very subtle. Nothing is really screaming out. I like that she has her all caps for her name, because it gives it like a stability and a seriousness, while this over here is very playful. And so I think it really matches up. And then there's a little logo over here on the side, and I think that's really just shows a lot of creativity with just using shapes and type. But over here, let's look at the line that she has here. So you're not going to have head barista somewhere over here. You really want to create that line there. Of course, you could try doing it over here if you wanted to try that way, but everything, your text should align in that way. Now let's talk about contact info. Here's a card with pretty typical contact information. I'd like to point out too that here, I like how this line falls above that and this line falls just below that, and these are the space that's up here is equal to the space that's down here. So you also want to pay attention to those kind of margins. So I want to point something out. When you're doing your contact information, you don't really have to use the word telephone. You don't really have to use the word email. You don't have to use the word website. We know what these are. So why bother adding them? I think in this case, you can make the case that it adds just another element of the repetition of the font combination. And so I think it's perfectly fine to use the word telephone or to use the word email or to leave it out. So I think it really just depends on how it looks. If you're using it as an opportunity to do something interesting with your design, then that's great. Now here's another example where she left off email and website and all of that, and then she just chose to do the words, and this really fits very nicely. And again, we want to notice that this information is equally dispersed among this margin. So that's another way that we really pay attention to the placement and the alignment. You can do fun things with squiggly lines and you can still have the invisible line. So you're still allowed to have fun. Okay, you can do it, but again, you still want to have that invisible line. Now this one, again, she's not using the the words. And then you also do have an icon option, and I will be back to talk about using icons in your business card.